maximizing forage production, and take it to Doc.
Okay, thank you, David. Hi, my name is Bob Fry, and I am a veterinarian by training. I live on the eastern shore of Maryland, and my veterinary practice is primarily working with nutrition in dairy farms only. So all the work is dairy, and probably 80–85% of it is nutrition work. So that's my day job, but I also have a dairy farm. It's 75 cows on 55 acres, and we do rotational grazing on that farm. So we'll be talking a little bit about grass here today, but we're going to talk about feeding concepts around forages. And if you have questions, I want you to certainly not hesitate to raise your hand, and we'll deal with your questions right when you have them. So we'll jump right in here. Before I get started, I did want to thank Tim and his group from King Agri-Seeds for hosting such a wonderful program for you guys and me as well. But really, my hat's off to Tim and the work that they do to try to share information and educate you guys. Okay, so the theme of this day is maximizing forage production. And what I hope to talk about is helping you achieve the greatest overall return from each one of your acres, okay? And I want you to start thinking about the return per acre. I'm going to talk about three basic things: forage planting decisions and having the effective balance between cow health, maximum production, and lowest feeding cost. Secondly, I'm going to spend some time talking about grass and grazing methods and the nutrition around feeding grass. And last, measuring your success. So and as I go through this this afternoon, you're going to find I'm going to give you very few details, but a lot of concept. And what I'd like for you to do is to be able to go home and be thinking about some of the concepts and how you can apply those concepts to your operation. And then the details certainly out there. You know, Tim and Dave and Josh, all those guys, they can get the detail for you. But some conceptual things I hope to share with you here today. So if you envision this circle here as a cow, or more specifically a cow's rumen, okay, we feed her two things. We feed a whole bunch of forage. And forage is fairly cheap, 8 cents per pound of dry matter on a just real rough basis here. Whereas grain, the other half of the stuff we feed, is pretty expensive. And today grain is roughly 20 cents per pound of dry matter. Okay? And in the most diets are, like 45 to 55% forage, and likewise 45 to 50% grain, roughly half and half. So anything that we can do to increase the amount of forage we feed the cow helps big time when it comes to the cost, because we're replacing something that cost 8 cents. We're replacing something that cost 20 cents with something that only costs 8 cents. And it also makes for a healthier cow, I believe. So the question is, how do we feed this forage and grain, okay, and put together the puzzle of protein, energy, and fiber, and a little bit of mineral, okay? This is the nutritionist's job, to get this puzzle fitting together just right to give you maximum milk, good reproduction in your herd, and most importantly, good health. And I firmly believe, as a veterinarian doing nutrition work, when I feed cows, I first have to think about health. If I don't have a healthy cow, but I'm getting tons of milk, I know I'm not going to get it very long. Okay? So you have to feed for health first. You get the health, then you can go after the milk, and the reproduction is going to come right along with it. So that's the basic concept in feeding cows. It's just like at the very most elemental level. Now, what forages are we going to plant to try to accomplish that so that we can increase the amount of forage and decrease the amount of grain? We have to maximize the quality of forage. You heard a lot about that this morning. And when we're talking about maximizing forage quality, it's cutting your haylage, whether it be alfalfa or grass, in an early stage, planting highly digestible varieties of corn for corn silage, storing them well. All those things go into maximizing the quality of corn silage, or maximizing the quality of forage in general. Quantity. You also have to maximize quantity. You got to have enough of the stuff. You cannot be short on forage. It's going to be very difficult to feed a healthy cow if you're short on forage. It's also going to be very expensive to feed a cow if you're short on forage. You want to minimize your risk. Risk of drought, risk from wind are very important. You got to plant forages that are the best use for your soil type, the best use for the weather conditions. If you're planting forages in the fall to extend the growing season, or planting forages late in the fall so that you have an early start in the spring, planting forages that are going to be suitable for heat and drought in the summer. Okay, you'd like to be able to do all of those things, but you can't do them all, and it's a compromise. And you've got to get the right balance that's suitable for you on your farm. Every farm's going to be a little bit different, okay? But these are the, and you can't hardly see them now, but you know, quality, quantity, risk mitigation, soil type, weather conditions. You got to try to get it all together and compromise to get a package that works for you, ultimately striving for the growing of maximum nutrients per acre per year, okay? Maximum nutrients per acre per year. We want to take every opportunity to capture that sunlight that Tim Fritz was talking about this morning and converting it into nutrients per acre. Okay. Now a little bit more about what forages to plant. Remember we said forages were the cheapest source of feed for your cows at 8 cents per pound of dry matter. First thing we want to do is lower the cost of forage, okay? Most high quality seed genetics cost a lot. You know, BMR costs more. Yeah, we were already, I don't know if you're going to get it, we were already playing with that a little bit. That's fine. BMR corn is going to cost more, BMR sorghum is going to cost more, new age genetics cost more. The only way you're going to really decrease the cost of your forage is to make an abundant amount of it. If you make 4 tons to the acre versus 6 tons to the acre, the 6 ton per acre field is going to be cheaper per pound of dry matter or cheaper per ton of forage. So high quantity is going to turn into lower cost forage. As you lower the cost of forage, you're going to be able to feed more of it, and that in turn is going to lower the cost per pound of grain. If you grow more forage of high quality and fill up a bigger portion of this circle, that's certainly going to reduce the grain costs. Now the next series of slides here all sort of look like this. I want to sort of lay them out. On your left, we're going to consider this as forage. On your right is grain. We've got several types of forages we feed. The yellow depicts corn silage, which you might feed. Green is going to be haylage, whether it's grass haylage or alfalfa haylage. A little bit of brown here for some dry hay, dry grass hay. And then on the grain side, a big portion of this is yellow, representing corn or energy. A little bit of brown for soybean meal or your protein supplement. And then the red here for mineral. This is pretty much the way all dairy diets look, except some of them have more or less corn grain. And the point I want to make with this slide is to see how much of the equation is made up of corn grain. Now we often think of protein as being more expensive than energy. And on a per pound or per ton basis it is. But to the dairy cow's diet, energy is way more expensive than protein because we have to feed so much of it. Roughly, we'll feed a dairy cow, a Holstein cow, about 15 pounds of energy, most of which is corn. We usually feed about 5 pounds of protein, most of which is soy. So soybean meal costs more, but it doesn't cost 3 times as much as corn does. So the take-home message there is that energy costs more than protein in your cow's diet. Now, if you get into a situation where you have inadequate quantity of forage, okay, you can see this line moves over, and now we've got a huge portion of the diet is going to be grain, of which a huge portion of that is going to be corn, and this situation always gets more expensive. So number one, you got to have adequate quantity of forage for your herd. Now, if you have adequate quality and quantity, the forage to grain ratio shifts to this side, okay? You don't feed near as much grain, and in that situation, your costs definitely go down, okay? I'm not telling you anything you don't already know, but I'm just trying to conceptualize it here for you as we go into a few more slides. Now, you see in this slide, this is roughly, I'm going to say a third corn silage, and maybe almost 2/3 haylage. If we can shift that such that we have a much greater portion coming from corn silage and less haylage, okay, that enables us to shift the forage to grain ratio a little further to this side, okay, and you can see corn now, or energy, is a much smaller portion of the diet. This gets even cheaper, okay? Okay. The more corn silage you can afford to feed, and when I say afford to feed, corn silage is going to be cheap, but it's the more corn silage your farm can afford to produce, okay, the cheaper your diet is going to become. Corn silage allows you to feed more forage. It's a relatively cheap forage to produce, and it reduces the amount of energy or grain that has to go into that cow's diet. Now, if you want to take it a step further, if you can get into a situation where your farm can afford to feed your herd all corn silage, okay, I would even say forget the haylage, just all corn silage, a little bit of grass hay, and then the energy portion of your grain mix, which is the most expensive part, gets to be quite small, and you feed a little protein supplement, and this is going to be one of your cheapest diets that you can produce. Question?
If you feed all corn silage, don't you need to buy more protein?
You do need to buy more protein, but it is protein is not the most expensive source of cost in your grain mix because you don't feed as. So let me just use an example. If you're feeding kind of a balance of corn silage and haylage, and let's say you were feeding 5 pounds of protein and 15 pounds of energy / corn, okay? And now you go to a big corn silage diet, you might end up feeding 10 or 12 pounds of energy and maybe only 6 pounds of protein. So 1 more pound of protein, but I get to kick out maybe 3 or 4 pounds of energy. I've done this calculation many times in the ration balancer, and invariably the highest corn silage diet is the least out-of-pocket expense type diet. And I'll say I didn't get that at first myself. I had a dairy farmer convince me of that. I didn't believe him until I really sat down and started doing the math on it, and it works just about every time. 2 questions here. First, you.
Is it the healthiest as far as acidity?
That's a great question. Is it as healthy considering the acidity of corn silage? It can be. It's not as forgiving as a diet that's half corn silage and half haylage, or some mixture of corn silage and haylage. I would just about always, in this real high corn silage diet, feed corn silage and a couple pounds of long stem hay or chopped straw, something like that, to give me some buffering effect. It can be done in a very healthy way. In the wintertime, this is what I feed my cows. I don't feed any haylage. And, yeah, I typically use dry hay. Yep. There was another question here.
Just wondering what milk quality would be as far as in the fluctuation between the
You mean milk quality from somatic cell point or butterfat and protein? I don't think you should see necessarily any difference if it's balanced properly. Yeah. Okay. Now there's one more deal I'll talk about here, and I want you to let's go back one. Okay, so you see where the break point is here between forage and grain. If I switch this over to an all grass diet, and I'm not talking about a grass haylage diet, I'm talking about grass like grazing. How many of you graze your cows part of the year? All right, so you're with me on this. There's quite a few of you. You can see the line moves over, and as we get into the grass season, you can feed a tremendous amount of grass to a cow because it's extremely high quality. We feed less and less grain. You'll do notice as we move the line over here in favor of more grass, the yellow starts to show back up, okay, because there's no corn on this side. When we're feeding all corn silage, there's a lot of corn grain over here. But as we moved over here, now we have to feed a grain mix that is higher in corn, okay. It's still not as high in corn as the corn silage haylage combination over here. So this one again is a very low out-of-pocket cost type diet. So my bias is grass when I can do it, as much grass as I can when I can do that. When I can't do that, it's as much corn silage as I can. Okay, so in conclusion on this part, you got several choices here. You can feed a low forage, high grain diet. You don't want to be doing that, I don't think. You can make some milk doing that, but it's quite expensive. Or you can feed a high forage, low grain, and that can come from several ways. One choice, corn silage and haylage and a low grain. It has to be very high quality corn silage and very high quality haylage. If you make junk here, you're not going to be able to feed as much of it, and then you're not into a low grain situation. High corn silage, low haylage, and low grain would be my next choice, and then grass and low grain would be my preference. Okay, a little bit about grass. These numbers come from the International Farm Comparison Network. It's a global network of agriculture providers, university people. It's not United States, it's not our extension service, it's from all over the world. 2008 and 2010, they looked at cost of production on various production systems in 40 countries around the world for energy-corrected milk. And you can see the numbers here. They're probably not accurate today, okay? They're probably not accurate for in Pennsylvania or in even the United States. Remember, this is 40 countries around the world. But probably what is very accurate is the relative rating of these things. Grass is certainly going to be, or grazing is certainly going to be your cheapest cost of production type dairy farming. Tie stalls where there's a lot of labor involved, and you're going to have fewer cows in a pretty high capital expense operation is going to be one of your highest costs of production. So because of this is why I'm interested in grazing, and it's probably why the vast majority of you guys do some grazing as well. There's a lot of different ways to do grazing, okay, all around the world. I hope none of you are doing it like this. This happens to be in Brazil, and they're actually hauling guinea grass. It's a grass you never want to see. It makes any grass you know look wonderful, but they're hauling guinea grass to the cows. And what I think we all strive to do in this part of the world is to let the cows go to the grass and control the management of the cows on the grass to harvest some very high nutrition. Okay. I'm often reminded when I think about managed intensive grazing is a quote from Andre Voisin. He was born in the early 1900s, and he said, managed intensive grazing is not simply turning cows out to pasture, but rather helping grass grow and guiding the cow to harvest it properly. Okay? That's pretty powerful to me. Our job is to help grass grow and then guide the cow how to harvest it. So I'm often reminded of that. And so as we give this grass the chance to grow properly, it becomes a real science and art, okay? And it's not just the cows on the surface of the ground, but it's the micro herd beneath the ground. You heard this morning about the earthworms, the dung beetles, all the different microbes and the protozoa that make the soils very healthy to allow you to grow a very healthy grass. And this happens to be me, and it's very important for me to know what's going on down beneath the surface of the grass. Cows can take care of the top part, but I want to see what the activity is down there below. There's a lot of different ways that we can graze in this part of the world. This happens to be what I call break line feeding or fence line feeding, grazing alfalfa there at the time. In my hands, alfalfa works best like this, and brassicas works very good like this. Both of those crops, if the cows go out across the field and trample it, the cows will not eat them very well at all afterwards. Alfalfa breaks, the stem breaks when a cow steps on it, and for whatever reason she doesn't like to do that. Grass will spring back up and she'll continue to eat it. Same thing with the turnips and other brassicas. So you can get extremely good grass utilization by just moving a brake wire about once every hour for about 3 feet. They waste nothing. And this alfalfa is grazed down just as tight as if you had mowed it. But it takes a bunch of kids to keep this going. So as I think about grazing, one of my mottos is to waste no grass. And our goal is to harvest all the grass this way. Okay? Get the cow to harvest it, spread our own manure. At certain times of the year that's difficult, and so if we can't harvest it by the cow, we're going to make some hay, or we're going to make some haylage. And what we don't want to have to do is this. The mowing is out, okay? If you're clipping forages, if you're clipping grass, you're basically wasting it in my mind. You need more cows or you need less grass, okay? Now, even these two, I don't particularly like to do because I don't like steel, okay? I don't own any of this stuff, and I have to hire guys to come in and do it. And if I can just have cows and grass, I'm going to get along a lot better, I believe. And so what I'm going to show you over the next series of slides is a system. What's that? Yeah, I'll get it in 1 second. Next series of slides are going to be, again, conceptual about grass production on a farm. Question here.
Clipping the pasture helps to build the organic matter.
It would help build the organic matter better than not clipping it at all, but I would contend that if you can have the cow consume it, turn it into milk, and deposit her manure out there, you're going to get the same build in organic matter, maybe even more so. Okay. My other experience with clipping, and trust me, I've done a lot of clipping, did it for a lot of years. With clipping, the residue left from clipping, cows don't like that on the next pass around with grazing. And so I'm not going to get near as effective utilization. Now the one time I will clip, if grass is getting ahead of me, is I'll clip ahead of the cows, and that works quite well. And when I say clip ahead, I'm talking just maybe 6 or 12 hours ahead, so that it's just sort of wilted, and they'll eat all of that, plus the grass that, and I'll clip it a little bit high, you know. So that's the one time I'll do it. There was another question. Yes, sir.